and welcome to a new Getting to Know Japan webinar. Thank you so much for joining us, and a big thank you to our sponsor, the Japan Foundation New York, for funding this series and enabling us to put this on each week. Today, we are joined by Dr. Dariusz Skowronski, who will be presenting on an introduction to sexuality in the Japanese context. Just a kind reminder to refrain from turning on your microphones during the duration of today's recording and presentation. Dr. Skowronski is the psychological, studies program coordinator and major advisor at Temple University Japan campus and an associate professor in psychological studies, teaching human sexuality, clinical sexology in the Japanese context, psychopathology, and other psychology courses. He is a psychotherapist specializing in clinical sexology and sexual therapy. He is trained in Poland and Australia and is available for face-to-face psychotherapy in the Tokyo area through Aoyama Bright Life Counseling, as well as offering video-based online counseling. For more information about Dr. Skowronski, please read his full biography on the YCAP's website. Thank you so much, Dr. Skowronski, for joining us today. I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Dariusz Skowronski, and as I was introduced, it's a really great pleasure to have a chance to talk to all of you today. I'm still talking from the university, my cubicle, so let's keep finger crossed that students will not force me to interact with them now. Okay, I have very brief introduction. So I understand, and I want to apologize upfront that, maybe some statements could be a bit oversimplified, but just because we have very, short presentation that doesn't allow me to go in depth in every little detail. If you want to know more about it, of course, please always feel free to contact me. I'm very happy to discuss it with you if you have any questions, and I encourage you to ask me questions later on. Today, it's almost mission impossible to try to condense the whole course, which is 3 months, into 30 minutes, but I'll try anyway. So let's share. Now I'm going to share the screen with you, and let's hope the technology is on our side now. As I was introduced, thank you very much again. I do a lot of work in the sexuality field. I am trained as a clinical sexologist, and psychologist is my major. Here at Temple, I teach different classes, including sexology and human sexuality. So what I'm going to discuss today is something what I do very often with my students and clients in my clinic, where I really work with individuals and couples. Okay, so let me just quickly go through I want to just cover today just a few basic phenomena, and I hope it will give you some ideas for further discussion. So of course, we are talking about dramatically changing environment around us. Of course, there are many publications. I just picked some of them. We talk about alarming marriage breakdown. Definitely, Japanese people simply almost stopped getting married. Of course, if you talk about Tokyo, like a big city, you can still see, bridal services everywhere, but it's, only something that is on the surface. In reality, many people simply are not interested, for many different reasons, getting officially married. And of course, everybody knows that already. We talk about drastically reduced birth rates, increased divorce rates, which traditionally they were quite low, historically speaking, but now they are very, very much the same as everywhere else, roughly around 50%. That's quite high, really high for the global average, which is 50% as well. And we have very dramatically changing sexual expressions and dating patterns among young people. One of this kind of new trends is people who are never married. I'm talking about people not people who wanted to find a partner, but for some reason they couldn't. It's about people who, from the beginning, don't even try to find a marital partner. They don't date, they are not interested in being in a relationship, and as a result, they never marry. Another thing is about emergence of herbivore young men or carnivore young men. This term is already kind of more than 10 years old. It was coined quite recently. It's simply the different type of social behaviors and dating patterns among young people. Of course, it's nothing to do with the food like in animal kingdom, but it simply is a kind of mental shortcut to present a different way of behaving. Another thing is, it's kind of joke almost, but it's really common saying that, Japanese people are not really much interested in sexuality, in sex at all. When we compare different types of research, and really on the global stage, it's one of the least satisfied sexual groups in terms of satisfaction and frequency of intercourse. Someone even found the kind of try to count it. I am not very happy to focus on just numbers, but it gives you just idea that on average, it's much lower than international average of 103. And of course, now we all talk about sexless couples. It's right now, the current data actually shows it's already over 50. This number is from 2-3 years back. So we are simply talking about a growing trend, and because that's exactly what happens. If you look at the trend, you can see clearly that this trend, I don't know why this, maybe something happened here. Let me quickly move some bar. As I said, I hope that it will be okay. I hope you don't see this, what I'm doing this on the screen, trying to create to. So if you can clearly see the trend. The data started being collected in 2004, and now it's clearly showing that every 2-3 years, more and more people simply say we are not active sexually within the marriage. And, that's from 2008, which is already a bit old, but even the current data shows similar things. Japanese people usually report 3 major reasons for stopping having sex within marriage. Of course, I'm talking now about marital couples. Tiredness from work, stopping having sex after birth with a particular reason. That's very interesting in Japanese context. And this famous mendokusai, which means simply that sex is simply too troublesome. So that's actually quite interesting. If you, excuse me, if you look at this trends, how couples present major reasons, you can clearly see that it's about exactly work. That's nothing surprising considering many people are still working long hours. And this element after having baby, that's very Japanese. It's not very common. Yes, everywhere in the world you can say that people after the couple gets first baby, first child, sometimes there are some changes in the sexual patterns, but here is much more dramatic and much more simply in terms of numbers, very staggering numbers. And this element can be bothered or it's too bothersome. It's very Japanese phenomenon. So I would say we are talking about some particular reasons in this country. And this is just in Japanese data, but just to show you, just for kind of curiosity, it's conducted by Tenga. And of course, we are talking about a company which makes a lot of money, but it's not about just, they actually did very good job in terms of proper research methodology. I was quite surprised when I checked the details of this publication. So even if this it's not academic source per se, we can still say it shows interesting trends. When we simply talk about sex as a most pleasurable possible activity, most countries clearly indicated that sex is the most important thing you can enjoy with other people. Japan was not. Number one was eating, actually. So eating, pleasure of eating was much higher than sexual pleasure. So that's clearly shows you that Japan is a kind of outlier, considering different countries. Again, I don't want to stick to just one result, but this data can be actually was confirmed in other research projects as well. And another thing is, which is quite interesting phenomenon, is the compatibility of spouses. You know, when we compare different countries, and of course we need to understand that's always culture, related, and something. What does it mean really, compatibility? But when we try to apply similar questions in terms of what do you consider about what you know about your partner, how you see your partner, what you share with your partner, we can clearly see that, again, there are different results. Average is around above 300 points. Japan is actually the lowest in the whole group of researched countries. Again, there could be very different reasons why some particular country can be lower or higher on this scale. But again, what is clearly indicated here, Japan has the lowest result. It means that people who decide to get married are not really that much oriented towards finding a person who is sharing a lot. Japanese are very good in this kind of practical reasons of choosing partners. Concept of romantic love is not here, historically was never really much rooted, which means that some criteria, once the person checks a kind of like a checkbox list, it could be already good candidate as a spouse. The element of sharing values, sharing interest, romance, even sexuality is not the highest on this. Of course, we talk about average result. Please remember there are always exceptions. But on average, how people decide to be together is not psychological compatibility. And of course, we have very dramatic changes, as I mentioned before, in dating patterns. Young people nowadays have very different ways of forming relationships than parents. So clearly we can say, just to what I mentioned before about this herbivore couples, it's actually coined by Maki Fukusawa. So maybe her publications can be very good reference point if you want to understand more about how the new concept of herbivore man, for example, can challenge this traditional understanding of hegemonic masculinity. Another thing is that alternative forms of masculinity, I'll talk about femininity in a minute, doesn't necessarily improve the issue of gender equality. This is kind of paradox because now we are talking about more and more about gender equality, and that's something that finally is getting momentum in the Japanese context as well. However, the new kind of type of young man not necessarily represents better equality. It's more response to shifting economic, social, and cultural variables. It's simply that this traditional hegemonic masculinity is less available to young people. It doesn't mean necessarily that it's that big change or really significant change in the mindset. So as I said, men who are more focused now on the less focused on the traditional values like very aggressive work culture, it doesn't mean they're actually more pro gender equality. It's just a kind of, so we need to understand it. It's more like a negative choice of something that I cannot get, then I simply withdraw. And of course, we need to understand that this element of alternative masculinity right now is not, it's not something that happened out of the blue. Actually, in Japanese context, we have a long, very historically, very well established, we call it soft masculinity. Even kabuki actors, bishonen in the pop culture. These are just few examples where we can say that, yes, in this part of the world, that there was always alternative masculinity. It simply had a particular category. It was put in the particular category, and the dominant role was still this element of kind of chauvinistic culture. Of course, now we are talking about, and I give you just a few ideas how the terminology changed. You know, we talk. It was before. It was about Femio Tokokun, you know, then Akiba Kei, and now, of course, herbivore man. But even now, already herbivore man, this term is not that popular any longer. So as you see, always this kind of alternative way to see masculinity was part of the social life here. But if we go a bit further, we need to, oh, something jumped here, okay. We need to mention about some so-called celibacy syndrome. It's not academic really term. It's used by pop media, I would say, more mass media. It's very common in social media too. But basically it shows that, and that's actually conducted by serious research programs, which we talk about more than over 61% of unmarried men and 49% of married women in the age of 34, which means that people are not really interested in dating. People are not really much focused on marital life. And even the Japan Family Planning Association found out that 45% of women aged 16 to 24 were not interested or even despised sexual contact. So it's not even talking about marriage. It's simply talking about having sex and dating people, which means that, you know, we are talking about a huge group of young people who are not even trying to pursue any romantic relationships. So that contributes to the cultural part of this celibacy syndrome. And on the other hand, in contrast, of course, as you can easily imagine, we need to talk about different aspects, commercial aspects of sexuality. Fuzoku and Mizu Shobai always were very strong part of social, cultural part of life in Japan. And sex workers always had some very, very strong connection with the mainstream cultural trends in Japan. Of course, again, we talk sex work is nothing new and nothing special in Japanese for Japan, but maybe the extent and the division between who and what kind of people are part of sex work and people who are outside this area. Here, it's a whole institution, it's a whole recognized part of social life. So on top of that, we can add enjo-kansai, compensating dating, which is very problematic, especially it involves young women or young men, because actually enjo-kansai, it's not only about girls dating older men, it's more about simply young people, sometimes could be young boys as well. And because Japan is quite obsessed, I would say, with the teenage girls and sexualization of teenage girls, that's why we talk about this baby-like women, Lolita syndrome, and so on. And this part of lolicon culture, of course, it's not dominant right now, but this element of school uniforms and so on is so deeply engraved in the pop culture that you have everything in the music industry, you have it in the video clips, in the popular, advertisements. So this element of dividing young lady as a sexual object, basically, and then again, we talk about sexual objectification. In the same time, we talk about people we expect to get married, being, respected members of society. So because of this kind of conflict, right now, Japan is undergoing a very dramatic, I would say, shift. Because, again, traditionally speaking, and I am fully aware that we cannot say that all Japanese couples follow this particular pattern, but still, this ideology or actually pressure that man is a provider, woman is simply a homemaker, is still rooted. Of course, less and less couples can afford this model because simply put, one salary is not longer enough to support the whole family. But financial reality is one thing, but the mindset and the very traditional way of dealing with things is another thing. So, we need to understand that we are dealing with many phenomena at the same time. We are dealing. Maybe I think I clicked something. For some reason, something is popping up on my screen, and it's a little sometimes. And my apologies if you can see something happening on the screen. So, one of the things which I want to mention is how, traditionally speaking, marriage was actually more about fulfilling social duty than romantic love. In the Western context, we talk about love as a part of romance, part of like a major ingredient or the dominant ingredient that is a bonding process between people. That's what makes people stick together. And romantic love includes almost automatically sexual component. But it's not really the case in Japanese context. As you know, historically it was a lot arranged marriages. Now, even if now there are many go-betweens, this kind of organized dating, this 3 girls, 3 men sitting together, all this stuff, it's still a kind of traditional way of dealing with things. It's not purely arranged marriage, but it's still in the kind of group-oriented society. It's still a way of dealing with new phenomena. And from one side, as I said, is this idea that young girls can be very sexualized. On the other hand, it's about finding the right type of person as a spouse. And one of the concepts I want to introduce, which is underlying, and actually, if you really go deeper, you can understand how it affects of sexual phenomena and social phenomena in Japan, is the concept of amare, introduced by Doi. It's a psychoanalytic term, but amare actually, it's kind of different way of showing love or attachment. It's the expectation that someone will impose upon your goodwill. It's a bit like a protection, about kind of sweet, almost spoiling protection. It's like a normal rules of behavior can be suspended. What happens during amare? It's a kind of, sometimes we in English it's translated as a sweet laugh. But yes, it's an element of protection, element of that I don't need to be the regular me myself. It's almost like a parent-child prototype, because amare actually is universal in every culture, especially when the child is an infant. Yes, during infancy, we expect that parents are, protecting they provide without any conditions. It's unconditional love that requires nothing. Me as a receiver of amare, I'm just here. That's me. You as a person who is giving me, you can do everything good for me. So it's a positive thing, but it means that I am kind of dependent on you. And this element of dependency is such important. Of course, for the little child, it's natural to be independent on parents. Yes, but in the Western, I would say, social development, it's slowly decreasing. Once the child becomes older, we expect more degree, is more independence reinforced, more this element that now it's time to become more independent. Whereas in Japanese context, amae never disappears. It only changes the object, but still it's always a dependent love. So it's not limited to parent-child relationships. That's universal thing everywhere in the world. But here we expect some element of amae in the spousal relationships, friendships, teacher-student, even doctor-patient. It's sometimes called as a lifelong arc of dependency. And probably people who live in Japan can easily, if you are a foreigner living in Japan, probably you observe that in many ways that there's for example, in a typical scenario, patient doesn't question doctor. Student just follows teacher. Friendship means it's a group, a dependent group that we protect each other. It's a good element of belonging to the group, but it means that you need to be loyal to this group. So this element of arc of dependency can be part of not only romantic relationships, sexual relationships, but any kind of relationship. Today, I don't have much time to describe it further, but I truly and I really want to encourage you to study amae concept further, because it will show you in a more detail how many relationships here are taken for granted. It's like, if I'm with you, you obviously should protect me. As long as I'm loyal to you, I expect some understanding that I can make mistakes and you always forgive me. This element is very important here. So in using different terms, parental dependency at all stages is almost encouraged. And maybe part of it is parasite singles, people who are dependent on parents much longer than expected. And I know it's a very kind of strong term, but it really refers to people who are 30, 40, or even more older, and they still, in Japanese context, are fully dependent on parental support. And we talk about these deeply rooted values, like, because Japanese culture is child-centered. So this distinction between childless women and mother, what I mentioned before about young girls who are sexualized, exactly applies here. Mothers tend to see the husband as not sexually desirable any longer. Once child is born, mother becomes like a relative, not a sexual partner anymore. And that's probably clearly indicates why young women are actually encouraged to be sexualized, because it shows like, oh, this is the only time in your life before you get married and have a child. On the other hand, once you're a mother, you are not sexual. That's very, okay, maybe it's not only typical in Japanese context, but I would say here the numbers and the pressure, social pressure, is much stronger. So this element of identical closeness, mother is so close with child. Again, remember, we talk about amae as the basic force here, how it operates in the family, context. It's a group loyalty, and it's mother's role to reinforce, to socialize children, to become part of community. It's like an extension of mother. We talk about close physical proximity. That's why mother must be devoted mother. She must almost give everything to a child. In such a case, other parent means father, becomes a satellite. He becomes much less important. And that could be one of the root issues why sexuality can diminish. Another thing, which is one of the very interesting, is co-sleeping kawanology phenomenon, which goes way beyond this kind of infancy. Well, probably you can understand that if, let's say, we talk about breastfeeding or something like that, of course, mother sleeping with child is perfectly fine when We talk about few months old children. But here, sleeping together with parents is much more common and goes way longer. So this famous Kawa-no-ji, of course, it comes from the Kawa, the river character. And these are numbers. And the research is from 2012, which is not a very long time ago. We talk about up even 17% of those 16 to 20 years old, they still sleep with parents. It doesn't mean exactly the same bed, but it means the same futon or the same room. But now let's think about the typical size of Japanese apartments. Even if we are not sleeping exactly in the same bed, we are talking about the same room. If we talk about 50%, up to 50 years old, half of the high school kids or junior high school kids sleep in the same room or even the same futon or mattress with parents. That could be another interesting element. This arrangement contributes maybe to how the intimacy is formed between mother and child, not necessarily between parents, which can be part of contributing factor to reduce sexuality. So, going further quickly, modern dilemmas. I know I'm touching on different things, touching on sexuality, but men left to their own devices aren't sure how to find wives in dramatically changing social environment. And many people are simply shying away from that. Another, I mentioned financial factor, because Japanese men cannot afford the same standard as usually the fathers. It means that some people simply give up, let's call it quickly. At the same time, women have other problems. Yes, traditionally it was about giving up career when you get married. Now, of course, many people continue working, many women continue working. But when I talk with my students, it doesn't mean that they sometimes want this. It's simply that they have no choice. And there's still pressure to be good woman, good mother is such a high pressure that sometimes it's difficult to compare. As a result, because of the childcare problems of the husbands who are still not much helping women on average, the result is that many people decide to be single or just to date for fun, but not really for the marital prospect. So quickly to summarize what I try to very briefly to introduce today is that we talk about potential conflict. Definitely in the, now 2024, we are talking about conflict between traditional and modern values. And probably you can see it everywhere on the streets. You can see people who still follow this traditional mindset of salarymen, for example, and shufu, let's call it, and modern women, young boys, young girls who simply are looking for something different. So this conflict is now, I would say, very much pronounced. It's very amplified and because social environments changing dramatically, social media and other things contributing to expectations, to different expectations, more comfortable life instead of some duties or continuing with tradition, it means that sexual trends are changing as well. So probably that's maybe easy way to summarize my today's presentation. And again, I want to say one more time that I fully understand that I tried to a little bit oversimplify the whole thing. And I didn't even touch today on cross-cultural aspects, for example, how foreigners find themselves in this kind of environment. But because of the time limitation, I haven't touched on it as yet. So thank you very much for this very giving you different ideas. And if you would like to ask some questions, please go ahead. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Skowronski, for your wonderful presentation. So to begin the Q&A portion, I would like to first begin with one of my own questions. So I'm curious, There's actually a video that's been kind of floating around on social media about cheating and how cheating is, depending on who the person is cheating with, it's not considered cheating, and how cheating is essentially viewed amongst young Japanese people. Do you think this kind of idea of cheating and maybe like deceitfulness plays a role into why, you know, younger Japanese people, or maybe even all Japanese people, are slightly hesitant to date or get married?
Okay, well, extramarital sex was always a big part of Japanese society. And it's very difficult to get reliable data on it because, of course, the topic is not openly discussed. But we even estimate that up to 50–60% of married men and around 40–50% of married women are engaged in the extramarital sex. So we are talking about, let's say, simply half of the society, like to simplify it. Of course, please remember, I can't offer you exact numbers here. But if we talk about 50% of society, roughly, engaged in extramarital sex, we need to ask why, because it's higher than other countries, at least what we have reported data. And it's at least 10 to 20% higher than what is reported elsewhere. So then is question, why? And one of the situations I already mentioned a little bit is this division that young woman has different role, traditionally speaking, than married woman. That's one thing. But nowadays, this element of cheating means sometimes, now, as you know, very common topic is called situationship. It's not even a relationship, situationship, where people are together, kind of friends, kind of roommates, sometimes share house, something like that. Sometimes they're colleagues at work, but at the same time, they add component of sexual intimacy. They don't even call it commitment. They don't call it fully kind of developed relationship. That's a situationship. And it's getting more and more popular. Now, but then the question is, what exactly is cheating? Because quite many couples who are in this kind of situationship, they don't even talk about being sexually exclusive. They say that being in a situationship means that there is openness to explore sexuality with other people. Then we can even start asking, what is here cheating? Actually, this concept is very difficult to even apply here. With the marital couples, it's probably a bit easier, but I'm not talking about now open relationship. That's a bit different concept, right? Or polyamory or something like that. No, but when we talk about situationship, which is in young people is much more common now. It's actually very, very strong trend. Then what does it mean to be loyal? What does it mean to be faithful? I think that's why what I try to say, this old-fashioned tradition, mean dividing young women from the married women, is still current, and then of course it means you can have sex with young people, and then you can have as much as you like in terms of sexual engagement, but once you get married, not any longer. On the other hand, once a child is born, teaching is kind of accepted because the person is not sexual any longer in the marriage. I like this question, but I want to say we are touching on so many suddenly, but actually it's a great topic. Talking about extramarital sex or extraparental partnership, it's absolutely important. And yes, more and more people definitely are more open to it.
Thank you so much. The next question comes from Patricia Yarrow. So, why do you say it is a Japanese phenomenon and no other country has these trends? I think she's referring to the graph that you had with the various countries.
Which graph?
The one by Tenga.
Okay. Oh, well. this graph, okay, this data, of course, shows clearly that Japan is different. It's number 5. Remember, the sex was position 5 in this. Other countries where most of them were number 1. So that it means that still the most important source of positive relationship is sexuality. And in this context, Japan is outlier because not any other country was ranked, like ranked 5th position as sexuality in terms of sexual contact. So that's definitely outlier. That's why I'm saying this is more specific Japanese culture. Of course, please, that's why I apologize in the beginning that I'm maybe trying to oversimplify things right now because of the very short presentation. Yes, in every culture, every place of the world, you can find different people with different dynamic, couple dynamics. But here we talk about numbers. I think what is important is to understand that some phenomena, they're not exclusively Japanese, but because they're much more common in Japan or more prominent here, that's why I call it more culture-specific issue.
Thank you so much. The next question comes from David Levitch. So question on the sexless marriages, is age taken into account? In other words, is the trend also seen among younger age cohorts, not simply being due to the high average age?
Yes, age factor is taken into consideration. Yes, we can say that with the duration of marriage, yes, there's some trend that sexuality can be decreased with time. Yes, on average, I want to emphasize this word, on average, with the people who are 50 or 60 years old and having been together for whatever 30 years, yes, we can expect a bit less sex. But again, the key word is whether it's how dramatic drop it is. If we talk about gradual decrease over the years, but still people want to be intimate together, they still want to share some physical intimacy, sexuality, even if it's less than before, or even still physical, it doesn't have to be sexuality in terms of sexual intercourse. We are talking about some other forms as snuggling, hugging, offering some warm physical touch. Doesn't need to be purely sexual stimulation. These things can be maintained absolutely the whole life. So yes, in Japan, it's a very quick, sudden drop in sexual activities, even already observed in couples who were just few years married. Today, I don't present this data, but couples who are just 3 years after getting married, 4 years, already report dramatic drops. Dramatic drops means, for example, from the couples who are sexually active, let's say 2-3 times a week, to suddenly once or twice a year. And I'm not talking about over the 20 years of marriage. I'm talking about over the 2-3 years of marriage. So that's such a dramatic. And what I hear the same applies to my clients in the clinic. When I work actually a lot with sexless couples. Very common thing what I hear is, everything was fine. Dating was fun. Sex was fun during dating. Then we got married. Then it was good. But then suddenly, just 2 or 3 years later, oh, I'm tired, or maybe later. And both ways, not only women or men. It's not this pattern. Actually, it's very interesting. Many men, Japanese men, withdraw from the sexual contact with wives. When I usually work with cross-cultural couples where I hear usually the Western partner, it could be man or woman, and the same applies in heterosexual context and homosexual context. That's very interesting. Even gay couple or lesbian couples, cross-cultural gay couples, say the same thing, that once we become a couple, like a marital couple or fully committed couple, we become like a family members. And when the family is there, it's not sexually stimulating any longer. I can talk more about it, but I worry that it's no. But yes, clearly, age factor is considered here, definitely.
Thank you so much. The next question comes from DK. What's behind the 45% figure? I think this is in reference to your celibacy syndrome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, we are talking about young women. We simply 16 to 24. So let's call it this prime time to explore sexuality. Well, this is the time when many people start being interested in forming relationships, right? And that's time when people explore sexuality and they start having sex. So yes, we are talking about almost officially half of Japanese women who are very young. They clearly declare they are not interested in dating, they are not interested in having sex, and for them, much higher priority is to simply having fun, social fun, like social gatherings, going for drinks, having some other activities. Like now, a lot of people are health conscious, yoga classes, Pilates, other things. Going to gym becomes, and it's very interesting. That's another difference when we compare data from other countries, that when people say, I go to gym, let's say in the very classic scenario, in the United States, I go to gym because I want to look good, because I want to maybe be more attracted and to have higher chance to find partner. But here, I go to gym and that's it. There's no because. I just want to look good. I want to feel good. But there's no connection that could be a good tool or way to find partner. That's very interesting. It's like a disconnected, and that's among young women specifically. When women want to look good, but it doesn't mean they want to look good to find partner. It doesn't matter in the homosexual context or heterosexual context. It's already the value itself, simply put. Looking good is enough already.
Interesting. Thank you so much. The next question comes from Uliana Silverera. Is there any sort of feminist movement in Japan that is against dating or marriage, like 4B in Korea, which can be partially responsible for the results in dating slash sex life that we see?
Okay, very good question. Thank you for this. Again, how to answer in 60 seconds, really. Okay, so let's put it clearly. Feminism in the traditional understanding never really got rooted here. Yes, absolutely, there are people who declare themselves as more feminism oriented. Yes, definitely. But let's put it this way. There was never like a strong movement, social movement. I can easily relate to the Me Too. Remember, Me Too movement, which was quite recently. In Japan, never really took much, attention from the social media. Yes, there were some cases, of celebrities discussing this, but it's never really strong enough to be significant in the public sphere. Of course, more and more women are seeking gender equality, definitely, and that's a good thing. We are talking more and more, and finally, it's much more significant push in the social life to recognize equality as a extremely important value, and that's good. That's great. Finally, well, yes, 2024. Finally, we are getting here. But in reality, it's only part of society. Please remember that we are talking about, for example, big cities, young women in big cities. Yes, that's different. But remember, please, Tokyo and Osaka are not the only place in Japan. We are talking about many small towns, somewhere there in Hokkaido, where talking about female rights is still way long to go.
Yeah, and I imagine along with, those type of rights, you also, see that there are women who just want to, they don't want to follow like patriarchy, they want to be, they want to have it all, you know what I mean? And they want to be able to ensure that even if they do decide to work and they get married, that they don't have to compromise, who they are.
Yes, exactly. Because yes, I totally agree. Patriarchy is definitely decreasing. This model is, yeah, that's a history already, and that's good. Maybe finally we should talk about different model. But now we are in a kind of vacuum. The patriarchal system is already kind of collapsing. At the same time, we don't have yet any model that can be attractive to majority of people. So what happens, we are talking about young people who don't want to follow the footsteps of parents. At the same time, they don't have much different to do. And as a result, the answer is, okay, I withdraw. I know it's not the topic today, but I just want to drop one piece of data. In Japan, officially, we are talking about more than 1,200,000, 1,200,000 people who are officially called hikikomori. We are not talking about 10, 20,000. It's everywhere. Okay, people who withdraw from society becomes kind of social hermits. It's everywhere. But numbers, imagine young people, 1 million, over 1 million young people stay in the bedroom or play, or they just stay online. They don't work, they don't study, they do anything apart from some very reduced social activities. And yes, predominantly it's a male phenomenon, but women as well. So we think about it, over 1 million people are simply not even trying to be social, not even talking about sex.
The next question comes from Sean Edmund. What is the status of non-heterosexual relationships in Japan?
Non-heterosexual, right? Yes. Oh, yes, of course. Today, again, because of the limitation of time, I'm not much touching on it. But yes, definitely. Now, I would say, and again, historically, it's very interesting because even if officially non-binary people and people who are not in the mainstream of like a typical heterosexual concept, yes, it was always group and places where people can meet and have regular interactions. Now it's a bit mixed with this concept of lifestyle. So now I think in Japanese concept, what is happening is that sexual orientation is a little mixed and sometimes blurred with social lifestyle. It doesn't mean that we are talking about people who are they identify themselves as homosexual. It's not that. It's more about the lifestyle of people can imitate some characteristics of the gay community, but it's not necessarily means it's a gay community. And because these two things are a bit blurred, that I mentioned this kind of soft masculinity before. I've got again, I don't want to simplify it, oversimplify it, and please, I don't want to jump to the simple conclusion here, but because these aspects of lifestyle and orientation are a bit blurred, that could be a bit confusing. But definitely, yes, I would say. But I mentioned, for example, in terms of sexual couples, committed homosexual couples, we observe similar trends. Very quick drop in sexual activities within the committed couple and a lot of sexual activities outside. So that applies both to the heterosexual couples and homosexual couples.
I guess in those type of situations where the lines are kind of blurred, would that be like sexual fluidity? Is that?
Yes, yes. And that's definitely something that, sexual fluidity is definitely a good term here to use. I sometimes use the term sexual experimentation. It's still like exploring options.
Thank you so much. If it's okay, I would like to ask two quick questions, or two last questions rather. we had a lot, but I know we were short on time. So the next question comes from Byron Siegel. I see many more young fathers carrying their infant child in a snuggly,
Mm,
pushing a baby carriage or changing diapers.
mhm.
When I first came to Japan in the 1980s, where does this group of Japanese men fit in with the framework you provided?
Okay, that's thank you again. Great question. And again, my dilemma how to answer in 60 seconds. Okay, that's definitely very new concept. It's very new. It's only the recent maybe 10 years really when we started observing this phenomenon that fathers are getting more and more involved. Definitely it's part of the changing of the traditional roles that young men who want to follow more Western standards. I think it's part of Westernization and kind of almost like a fashion. It's not deeply rooted in the mindset of equality, gender equality yet. It's more about being more attractive as a man in terms that I'm more caring. It's very new phenomenon. I still would call it's more about following social fashion aspects than actually deep transformation of gender roles, but definitely I would say it's a kind of front runner. I would say this is a sign. It's definitely they are front runners of the changes coming more to Japan.
And the last question comes from Ira Stevens. Japan has changed a lot over the years, and it seems that the Japanese men are much more nice, less rebellious, and more respectful. And I'm wondering if the concept of overmothering more pronounced now than it was, say, going back 50 or 100 years ago.
Oh yes, I definitely still element of what you are mentioned here is important. Okay, again, it's a multi-layered issue, but what I would say, these men who are becoming more cooperative, let's say, less dominant, it's a very important question to ask whether it's a positive choice or negative choice. As I said before, research shows that many men simply cannot afford the lifestyle of dominant, assertive men any longer. So what they do, they have no option how to more identify with mother style, mother type, because simply put, I know it's definitely it's simplistic. I cannot be like father, and I don't want to be like father. So what I need to be like mother. It's like but it doesn't sound like a positive choice. It's more sounds like the only option some young men can actually identify with. But definitely, I'm sorry, this question requires much deeper analysis, and I already see the time clock here.
Well, thank you so much. So Dr. Skowronski, if in the instance that people had other questions and they weren't able to ask them, is there a way they can contact you?
Oh, yes, of course. First of all, it's easy to find me at TUJ, Temple University Japan campus. If you type in my name, I should pop up. Apart from that, I run my clinic, which is Bright Life Counseling. So if you find brightlifecounseling.com, you can definitely contact me. If you want some consultation or some simply discussion, as long as my time permits, but I'll be very happy to answer you. If you say that you participated, here in our today meeting, I'll be very happy to assist you further. So please feel free to contact me.
Thank you so much. So once again, thank you so much, Dr. Skowronski, for your time today and taking time out of your day to be with us and for your presentation. There was so many amazing questions, and I think a lot of that has to do with how many interesting facts and all of the data that you showed in your presentation. So thank you so much. And once again, thank you to our program sponsor, the Japan Foundation New York. So once again, thank you so much, Dr. Skowronski, for your time today. We really, really appreciate it. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us once again. We hope that you will join us next week. Thank you so much. See you.